let me tell you guys. So I get this backpack here that's sent to me that, you know, FedEx box comes in. Jen's like, babe, there's a gift waiting for you. I open up the FedEx box. I don't know what this is. I'm like, okay, why is... Well, at first I'm worried because it's dirty, it's old. I'm like, what? Who would send me a gift like this? It's, you know, so my kids are sitting, I start reading this letter. And I'm reading this letter by a man named Scott Rodriguez. I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast. First generation American Cuban. He's 35 years old, out of San Fernando Valley, Santa Clara Valley, which very familiar with that area, Canyon Country, Valencia. He talks about his parents who started a business with one truck in 1986, and they built it in 2004 to $25 million a year business. They sell it and they retire. And he's going to school while he's in high school. And, you know, he's got this one teacher that he's working with, Mr. Whitmire, I believe is the name. Yeah, Carl Whitmire, freshman year at Hart High School in Newhall, California in 2000. And Carl came out of retirement to be a teacher's aide in my study skills class, okay? So he's always there, but he never talks about military stories because he used to be in the military, he used to be in the Navy, right? For 16 years, right? And so he says he was a gunner, he's this. And they say every time I would go up to him to ask him stories at 13 years old, he said, I was just a 13-year-old boy. He said he would never tell me any of these stories. Anyways, fast forward to the point where he's no longer coming to school because he's got lung cancer. And he's asking everybody, where is Mr. Whitmire? I got emotional reading this. I had Jen read it because it was an emotional story. Anyways, finally, he finds out that Mr. Whitmire is in a hospital on his deathbed. He says, I come back to school January 6, 2002, which is 20 years ago, and Mr. Whitmire wasn't there in class. My teacher told me he was in a hospital. I jumped on the computer and started typing a letter to Mr. Whitmire. I wrote him to tell him that what he meant to me and how he touched my life. I gave the letter to my teacher since she said she was heading to the hospital to see him. I looked at my teacher and said, I don't care what you do and how you do it, but make sure he gets this letter. Mr. Whitmire passed 10 days later on January 16, 2002. I walked into class and my teacher took me into the hallway to tell me the bad news. She also had a box and a card in her hand. She handed me this box and card, and Mr. Whitmire wanted me to give you this. Mr. Whitmire left me his World War II backpack.
Wow.
Freaking A. I cried and cried. Was the first time I had lost someone I loved. This backpack represents freedom, Patrick, represents sacrifice, love. I want you to have this gift from me and from Mr. Whitmire. I know I don't know you, Patrick, but I'm so damn proud of you and thankful for this. This is freaking emotional, right?
Good, wow,
let me tell you guys, this is the value of a person making a positive impact in a 13-year-old kid that he's now 35 years old, American, Cuban, first generation. His parents set an example. This, you know what this represents to me? Values and principles.
That's right.
This is values and principles. This is what we all want when we were kids. This is what a 16-year-old kid that maybe doesn't have it in his asshole, he just wants somebody to say, listen, lead. This is tough. Make the tougher choice. Don't make the easier choice. We are living in a generation that these types of no one's going to know Mr. Whitmire. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be known, stories going to be written about this guy. But he made an impact in a 13-year-old kid's life, gives him this 20 years later, Scott Rodriguez gives it to me. So yeah, I know this whole thing kind of, I don't know how this happened, but we're going there and you make the comment about redemption. And then we see the Gallup article that we saw yesterday on Drudge that we're talking about it that goes to Scott Rodriguez. Scott, I don't know if you're watching this or not. If you are, appreciate you for this gift. You're an absolute stud. More power to you for the parents that raised you, and as well as you being able to give love to a teacher like him and in sharing this sentiment with me. This is going to be in our podcast set. I thank you for this kind gift. Anyways, we need more stories like this.
Amazing.
You have a Mr. Whitmire story. You have a Mr. Whitmire story. You have a Mr. Whitmire story. We all have a Mr. Whitmire story, right?
Yep.
So if you're watching this, you know, maybe let's give a little bit credit and stories to people like that in our lives. You got an Instagram profile with 800 followers. Make a video and share the story of your Mr. Whitmire, okay? I remember years ago, I was at Glendale High School, 1.8 GPA, 14 years old, health and guidance teacher. This lady named Miss Sinclair was tough on me, challenged me. I would always sit in the back. I never sat in the front. I'm not a front-sitting type of guy. I sit in the back because that's the, you know, you can get away with a lot of stuff. She's like, hey, Patrick, you're sitting right here. She sits me right in front of her, which I'm like, this is the worst real estate. I don't want to sit here because accountability is high in the front, accountability is low in the back.
Worst.
So next thing you know, I'm listening to, by the way, she's 4'11" on a good day, okay? And long story short, she's a major in the Army. Because of her, I later on joined the Army. I went back at 28 years old, and I surprised her. No, at 33 years old, 34 years old, there's the videos online. I surprised her. We took her a bunch of gifts. I talked to the principal. She had no clue I was doing this. In front of all her students, I said how she changed my life. And do you know, Miss Sinclair and I, for the last 12 years, we've been pen pals? Really? She writes me letters. When she dates a guy, she says, I want you to meet this guy. I go have lunch with the guy, and I say, so what do you think? She calls me afterwards. We've done this multiple times. This woman changed my life. She's a regular human being that made an impact on a 14-year-old kid's life that at 43 years old, 30 years later, we remember that. We need to tell those stories. Those day-to-day people that made a positive impact, we can't forget them. We got to recognize those folks as well, because if we don't, the market's not going to do it. So
if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.